My brother-in-law kicked me off the family trip list because you don't contribute enough. Yet when he discovered who had actually paid for everything, he rang me up, practically on his knees. It all started with what looked like an innocent conversation, one that ultimately exposed just how rotten my brother-in-law's ego was and how much contempt he'd been harboring toward me for years. Every year, my family takes one of those trips where we rent a big house somewhere nice, with a pool, nightly cookouts, and rooms assigned by drawing lots. Nothing fancy, just a little getaway that's become tradition. As always, the planning was left to my older sister and her husband, my brother-in-law, a guy who's forever had a boss complex even though he's never so much as run a grade school raffle. To him, any excuse is good enough to strut, to act as if he carries the world on his shoulders, when all he really does is manipulate everyone so he can look like the great hero who fixes everything. This year's destination was a friend's ranch near Santa Rosa de Cabal, complete with hot springs and the works. Not cheap, of course. From day one, there was a voluntary contributions list, so each household could put in whatever they could. I'm no fool. I knew that word voluntary was just window dressing, because we always ended up pressured into paying a fixed amount. So back in February, I started stashing away money from my freelance gigs. I even skipped a couple of nights out and let my gym membership lapse, just so I'd be ready when it came time to chip in. What I never imagined was that, when the big planning meeting at my parents' place finally rolled around, my brother-in-law would pull a stunt as filthy as the one he laid out in front of everyone. The meeting was cruising along. My sister was talking possible dates. Mom wondered whether the house had enough bathrooms. Dad was already daydreaming about bringing his old portable grill. And I was just listening, jotting down notes on my phone. Then, out of nowhere, my brother-in-law cut in with that smug tone he uses whenever he wants the spotlight. He said it was time to decide who was definitely going and who was still unsure or not contributing enough. Everyone turned to him, confused. He settled back on the sofa like it was a damn throne and started reading a list off his phone. When he got to my name, he paused forever, then laid it on with all the condescension in the world. Since you haven't confirmed your contribution or your availability, we're assuming you're out this year, man. And honestly, it's not right for someone who's not helping to freeload off everyone else's effort. Just like that, in front of the whole family. And the worst part wasn't what he said. It was that shit-eating grin he wore. The one he flashes when he knows he's sticking a knife in but still wants to look like he's just telling it like it is. I stayed quiet, not because I had nothing to say, but because the hit was so unexpected it left me defenseless. Mom stammered something like, "Oh, but he said he'd help," and my sister tried to play surprised, though it was obvious she'd known all along. But my brother-in-law held firm. He said the group needed organizing and we couldn't keep adding people last minute just because. Right then I realized this wasn't a simple logistical call. It was a subtle way to humiliate me, to strip me of worth in front of everybody, to paint me as a freeloader, even though I already had my contribution saved up and he didn't know it. And that's where he screwed himself, because that was the breaking point. That was the exact moment I decided I wasn't going to sit back and take it. Not after busting my ass to earn my share. Not after saving so hard just for this idiot to yank my spot like I was dead weight. I said nothing else that night. I left without making a scene, without a complaint, without an explanation. I left the way you do when you're about to pull off something big, something that's going to hurt. I left knowing that if they kicked me off the trip for not contributing, then I was going to take the whole damn trip for myself and leave them staring up at me from below. And that's how it began. The idea wasn't revenge at first, I swear. It was a need for justice. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized justice wasn't enough. I wanted first-class revenge. The kind that lets you sleep at night while the other guy tosses and turns in his own shattered pride. So that very week, I started moving my pieces. And believe me, by the time I was done, even his friends wouldn't look at him the same, because the guy who wasn't contributing had, in fact, paid for absolutely everything, and he was going to learn that the hard way. Update 1. Exactly 3 days passed after that meeting at my parents' place, and through those 72 hours, I replayed the scene over and over in my head. My brother-in-law's smug face, the passive-aggressive tone he used to say I didn't give enough, everyone's uneasy glances, like they were afraid to contradict him, and that damned feeling that they'd painted me as the broke relative trying to mooch a free vacation. It burned so badly I couldn't sleep, ate without hunger, and every time a phone notification buzzed, I hoped it was someone asking if I'd really failed to pitch in, some chance to defend myself. But nothing. Dead silence. The guy had booted me from the trip, and everyone, out of convenience or cowardice, just assumed that's how it had to be. So instead of stewing in anger, I decided on a little reckoning. Being meticulous by nature, my payback wasn't going to be impulsive. I wasn't going to shout or send passive-aggressive texts. No, I needed something surgical, precise, something that would leave him so exposed he couldn't rebuild his image even if he tried. First step, total control over anything related to the trip. Luckily, weeks earlier, I'd already secured a major advantage, though nobody knew it. When the trip was first mentioned in the group chat, my sister said we needed someone to book the lodging. Naturally, no one volunteered. People tossed vague suggestions and WhatsApp links to ranches, but no one nailed anything down. So one night, quietly, I contacted a friend who works at a travel agency. I explained what we wanted, the head count, possible dates, and budget. He sent me 3 options at discounted rates. I picked the best, and to lock it in, I put down a deposit on my card. I did it without telling anyone, figuring I'd share the info later and we'd all settle up. But after what happened at the meeting, that reservation stopped being a simple placeholder. It became the key to the whole operation. I called my contact, told him every email and document had to be sent only to me, and asked him to scrub any reference to my brother-in-law or other family members. In return, I promised to cover the full amount if necessary, and not to breathe a word. He agreed. Right then and there, I paid the balance with my savings. Bottom line, the ranch everyone would vacation in was fully paid under my name, with my money, and none of them had a clue. While my brother-in-law strutted around bragging that he had everything under control, I'd sealed the deal from the shadows, the real architect of the getaway. The next step was even sweeter. My family relies on a couple of us for anything digital. I'm one of them. From designing the itinerary to creating the private Telegram group for photos, everything runs through me, so I use that to my advantage. I whipped up a fake PDF my brother-in-law could flash around to look like the organizer. But the real document with all the actual data sat in an encrypted folder only I could open. My name as sole payer, the bank confirmation, the invoice, everything. I didn't need to say a word yet. Just wait. To cap off phase 1, I gathered evidence in case anyone decided to go blind when the time came. Printed receipts, emails, bank statements, time-stamped screenshots. I stashed it all in a folder titled, "When the Bastard Comes Begging." Every time I opened that file, I felt a little more at peace, knowing that the cardboard castle my brother-in-law was building would crumble the moment it met reality. It was only a matter of time. No rush. Let him keep talking himself up. The higher he flew, the harder the fall. Best part? The fall wouldn't come from some sudden betrayal or impulsive scandal. It would be crafted by his own arrogance, his blind ego leading him to underestimate me. I, the guy who wasn't contributing enough, had already paid for everything. And when he found out, he'd have no one to blame but himself. All this happened while he kept sending out lists and messages, feeling indispensable. And I, quietly, tightened the trap that would expose him as the pretentious fool he'd always been. Update 2. 2 weeks passed, and the family vibe turned weird. Like everyone sensed something was off but lacked the guts to say it out loud. Life went on. The family group chat filled with trivial messages. Who'd handle the meat? Who was bringing cards, or the blender for micheladas. Meanwhile, my brother-in-law strutted around virtually like a fighting cock, doling out tasks as if he had any real authority. He sent voice notes saying he'd taken care of everything, that transport was arranged, and please don't delay payments because I can't keep fronting the expenses myself. That line, fronting expenses, made my blood boil. With what money? The only thing he'd done was raise his voice like he owned the trip. What he didn't know was that his bombastic speeches were digging his own grave. I stayed silent, didn't reply in the group, didn't correct his lies. I just watched. But I did start dropping subtle comments, ambiguous enough to spark doubt. In a private chat with my cousin, I said it was odd they were talking about covering costs when I'd transferred everything on time without anyone even asking. She, confused, asked if I meant transport or lodging. I slipped in. No, the house. I've already paid for it. But you knew that, right? She went offline for ages, and the next day her tone in the group shifted. Not so enthusiastic about my brother-in-law's voice notes anymore. She even suggested a general review of contributions for transparency. First domino down. In a family conditioned to keep the peace by staying quiet, all you need is one crack for the leak to start. Then my aunt dropped an innocent remark that was music to my ears. We were at my younger cousin's birthday, slicing cake on the terrace, when someone praised how well the trip was coming together. My aunt, with her trademark mix of gossip and curiosity, said, Strange we haven't done our usual kitty this time. From what I know, nobody's asked for money, but everything's paid already, right? Silence. My brother-in-law, who'd been chirping away with a beer in hand, froze like his soul got yanked out. He forced a laugh, cleared his throat, mumbled something about having advanced payments because he knew how this goes, and the balance would be done later. I saw the insecurity eat him alive. He scratched his neck, glanced at my sister, muttered, "Besides, if others already covered things, we'll just adjust." I noticed my cousin, the same one I'd messaged, look away and cross her arms. No one believed him now. He wasn't the cocky rooster, just a guy struggling to keep his story straight while everyone did mental math. If the house was paid and nobody had chipped in, who the hell had? I realized then the collapse wouldn't come from a single reveal, rather from accumulated cracks until it all caved in. I didn't need to shout that I'd paid. His lie would become untenable on its own. He was digging his grave with no way to justify his claims, and I, silently, was shifting just the right pieces so the implosion would happen in front of everyone without my raising my voice. Because when a fraud is exposed, what destroys him isn't the direct accusation. It's the look of those who once believed and now see the swindler he always was. And that look was tightening around his neck like a noose. It was only a matter of time till it closed. Update 3. 10 more days passed before what I'd been waiting for finally happened. With surgical patience, my brother-in-law's mask began to crack, and best of all, I didn't have to lift a finger. The family, now infected with doubt, started seriously asking what had happened to the money. No one said it outright, but the group chat got heavy, tense. Jokes died down, messages were cautious. That pre-trip excitement was gone. Some already suspected my brother-in-law had taken credit he didn't deserve. I kept silent, watching the flames spread from the couple of sparks I'd dropped. Then, late Wednesday night, I got a call that made me laugh out loud in my room. Him, the same brother-in-law who dissed me in front of everyone. He was calling at 10:47 p.m., like it was an emergency. I let it ring a couple of times before answering. His voice started soft, almost fake, like someone trying to sound friendly while stress betrays him. Asked how I was, how the week was going, if I was excited for the trip. I answered in monosyllables. Finally, he got to the point. He'd noticed some misunderstandings in the group, rumors getting twisted, and thought we should clarify things to avoid gossip. I listened. Eventually, voice shaky, he said someone told him I'd made a significant transfer for the house, and if true, he'd like to coordinate to include it in the overall balance. So he knew, or at least someone had given him enough detail to swallow his pride and call. He tried diplomacy, claiming the meeting had been misinterpreted, that he never meant to exclude me, just apply pressure so everyone would commit, that I'd only been left out temporarily. Now that things were clearer, he felt I should rejoin the group as if nothing happened. I let him babble until he asked if I could send copies of the receipts so he could merge them with his and present them as a joint effort. Translation: he wanted to keep playing organizer, but include me as a silent partner to cover his backside and keep the family from learning he'd spent $0. That's when, for the first time in this saga, I spoke plainly. I said I had no problem sharing documents, but first I hadn't forgotten the meeting, how he booted me with a fake smile and that bullshit speech painting me as a leech. I reminded him of his line, "Nobody rides for free," and that now, knowing I was the only one who'd actually paid, he'd better have the guts to face the fallout. I heard him tremble, literally. His voice cracked. He tried one more excuse, but I cut him off. I didn't need his validation or permission to go because the place was paid under my name. If I felt like it, I could change the guest list and leave him out. Silence. Then the most humiliating words from his mouth. "Don't do that, please." I didn't know, really. I didn't mean to offend you. I just thought you wouldn't put anything in and I got carried away, I swear. I could almost see his face through the phone. No longer the confident jerk who'd looked down on me, but a man eaten alive by fear. I ended the call telling him not to phone me again and not to use me to prop up his show. If he wanted to unify documents, he could do it in front of the whole family. I wasn't lifting a finger to protect his lie. I hung up, opened the "When the Bastard Comes Begging" folder, updated everything, call date and time, a transcript, personal notes, stage final strike, ready. He knew, and I'd made up my mind. Not only would I expose him, I'd do it so clearly that any defense would only make him look more ridiculous. When someone screws you with contempt, the least they deserve is to be put on their knees before everyone. That's exactly what I would do. Update 4. The final pre-trip meeting landed on a scorchingly hot Sunday. We gathered on my parents' terrace, and from the start the air was thick. Everyone sensing a blow-up coming, but nobody wanting to strike the match. They greeted me with forced politeness, tight smiles, greetings that felt like social protocol. Nobody addressed the elephant, but whispers had grown all week. Some already knew my brother-in-law's story stank. Those who didn't at least suspected. He no longer spoke with gusto, avoided my eyes, visibly nervous, like every phrase was a rope ready to snap. Mom tried to keep things civil with juice and empanadas nobody touched with real appetite. Talk began with trivialities: what clothes to pack, whether to bring board games, who could lend a big cooler. My sister tried to keep order, but every attempt hit awkward silences. Then my cousin dropped a bomb. Innocent face and all, she said before continuing. It'd be good to explain exactly how the house had been paid, because she remembered no kitty, yet apparently everything was covered. My aunt immediately chimed in, agreeing she found it odd nobody had asked her for a peso and that such an expensive place came out of nowhere. My brother-in-law started to sweat, literally wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. He gave evasions. He'd fronted some payments, wanted to keep things practical, hadn't wanted to bother people for money. His words tripped over themselves, contradictions piling up. Dad, silent till then, asked directly if he'd paid for the house. He answered yes. Well, partly, with help from others. Then he looked at me with a mix of pleading and resignation, hoping I'd bail him out. I stayed silent for a long beat, let the quiet stretch until everyone felt how needed it was. Then, in a calm voice, I said it wasn't true. I said the house had been reserved and paid in full by me over a month ago. I had receipts, emails, confirmations, everything documented if anyone wanted to see. I explained I'd done it to pitch in like every year, but had been excluded under the excuse that I didn't contribute enough. I didn't yell, didn't insult, just laid out the truth. Shock. No one spoke for seconds. My brother-in-law stared at the floor like answers might be hidden in the tiles. My sister's mouth opened without sound. Mom, uncomfortable, asked if I was sure. I said yes and offered to show proof. I passed my phone around. No one doubted. The evidence was watertight. My brother-in-law tried excuses, misunderstandings, lack of communication, but nobody listened. My aunt called it disrespectful that after I'd paid, they'd still kicked me out like a parasite. My cousin, who'd nudged the downfall, added that if he had any decency, he should apologize publicly and sit out the trip. Those words hit like a slap. My sister begged everyone to calm down, but too late. The damage was done. The image of perfect organizer, efficient leader, gone. Worst of all, he had only himself to blame. I stood, grabbed my stuff, told them I didn't need apologies, just that next time they think twice before humiliating someone for not showing off enough. The trip was still on, paid. Everyone could go if they wanted. But my brother-in-law would have to decide whether he had the face to show up after what he'd done. I didn't wait for an answer. I left with a calm I hadn't felt in weeks, knowing there was no turning back. His lie had died right there on that sweltering terrace, and the humiliation now had a new owner. Final update. The trip happened a week later, and although everyone tried to act normal, the vibe never fully recovered. The ranch was immaculate. Cozy rooms, heated pool, game area, fully equipped kitchen, even hammocks overlooking the mountains. Every detail had been planned from day one, and every family member, especially those who'd ignored the drama, knew the vacation existed solely because I'd made it happen. Conversations were awkward at first, but gradually people came to thank me privately for not canceling and for maturely keeping the peace. Little did they know my silence wasn't maturity. It was a strategy to make my brother-in-law's fall longer, harsher, unforgettable. He didn't show the first day. In fact, he ignored group messages. My sister came, but dulled, ashamed. They'd clearly fought and she'd probably dragged him into the emotional hell he'd forged. I didn't care what they discussed. I wasn't there to rescue his image or ease guilt. I was there to enjoy what I'd paid for, and deep down, savor everyone's discomfort after they'd booted me like a freeloader. First nights, the topic hovered though unspoken, like a cloud overhead. They knew there was moral debt. I was collecting it in silence, and the price wasn't money. It was exposure. Best moment came on day 3, when without warning my brother-in-law pulled up with a suitcase and the shittiest expression sunglasses could not hide. Surprise and tension mixed in the air. Some greeted him coldly, others ignored him. I, of course, didn't stand or look his way. Just kept sipping coffee on the terrace while I heard him shuffle through the house, steps tentative, like he knew he was trespassing on ground that no longer belonged to him. His attempts to fit in were pathetic. Forced jokes, asking if we needed anything, trying to join a card game. No one saw him the same. His social credit had tanked, and he knew it. The bonfire night was the kill shot. We were all around the flames, beers in hand, sharing old stories, laughter finally flowing. When one cousin, who'd once admired my brother-in-law's leadership, jabbed, half teasing but sharp, "So this year you didn't bring your task lists or 5-minute voice notes? Weird? I thought you'd organize us right down to when we shit." Laughter exploded. Some tried to hide it, but it was clearly mockery. He laughed, weak and forced, eyes down. His public role stripped away. He couldn't defend himself without looking pathetic. That simple, devastating comment ended his fictional reign. No one took him seriously anymore. His words carried zero weight, all because he'd tried to humiliate me. After the trip, the family chat lived on, but its tone changed. Others proposed ideas. Others took initiative. My brother-in-law was reduced to a spectator, replying okay or dropping a lame sticker. He never apologized face-to-face, never admitted his wrongdoing. Didn't need to. His humiliation was public, slow, and dragged out for weeks, just as I'd planned. Because revenge, when served quietly and unhurried, becomes a lesson you don't forget. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need noisy payback or stupid fights. All I needed were facts, the truth, and his own arrogance eating him from the inside. Today, whenever someone mentions that trip, they do so with a mix of gratitude and shame. Gratitude toward me for saving the getaway without openly outing anyone. Shame toward him for exploiting everyone's silence to pose as a hero in a story he never understood. And though no one says it aloud, everyone knows. The vacation wasn't just a family outing. It was the perfect stage to unmask the fraud who'd manipulated them for years from his cardboard throne. It was there, in that mountain-ringed silence, that I toppled him without laying a finger on him, stripped him of everything without raising my voice, and showed him, from experience, that when you underestimate the quiet one, you end up begging him not to speak, and when he speaks, it's already far too late.